I'm Bouris, and this is Straight Talk.
Hey, Iliza.
You are the most Australian-looking man. Like, you are.
Please welcome Iliza Shlesinger.
Iliza Shlesinger is a crowd sellout comic.
Every molecule of your DNA, we go through it like
scanning for physical abnormalities.
How did you know you're going to be a comedian? I don't know, like, were you always a funny kid or?
Yeah, I think when it was clear I wasn't going to be a professional athlete.
The Dallas Rays comic has a humor that is sharp. How good has Netflix been for comedians?
You don't need to be on The Tonight Show. You don't need to have had a special on Comedy Central. The weirdest moment, going to Malaysia, and you're just sitting in front of a group of people who look nothing like you, and they all knew my dog's name.
And you got a stinky fish mouth. I guess you.
You can't bruise her ego.
I just say it. I don't ask for permission. If I'm saying something, I believe it, and it doesn't matter if you disagree, because I said what I said.
Again, guys get sexually rejected as it's part of being a guy. Like, you want it? Nope. Okay. Anyone else? Hey. One over here. Dick over here. Penis over there. 1, 2, 2, 2 over here. Over here.
Because I'm trying to work out how tough it is for a mum, not only being away from her husband or partner.
It's hard to be away from my husband and my partner because I have sex with both of them.
Hey, Iliza.
Hey, Mark.
How you going, all right?
You are the most Australian-looking man. Like, you are. They're like, it's going to be an Australian podcast. I'm like, that is what I want to see. Is like a rugged, tan, handsome, like blonde hair. Like, you are Australia.
Okay, let's turn this around. You can do the podcast. Come on, just start interviewing me. I'm enjoying it
Why
already.
do I feel like you're secretly not Australian and I got it wrong?
My dad's Greek and my mother's Irish, but I'm born here. I'm first generation Aussie, so I'm pretty Aussie.
Yeah, you look great.
What I'm loving about talking to you, I love a comedian. I love a comedian. Two things in my life that are my favorite things: magicians and comedians. I don't know.
Oh no, you have terrible taste. Oh no, that's awful. Don't tell that. It ruins the good looks. I feel like all like magicians.
I love magicians, and I particularly love American magicians, and I love American comedians. I mean, I've been feasting on Bill Burr. You know, like I just can't find enough of him. You know, and I love the whole process of listening to dudes who, you know, like take my brain out of the shit that I have to put up with day to day, and allow me to just laugh at what their position is. And I mean, I'm seeing you coming to Australia, right? So how hard is it for a comedian to come to Australia today to make sure you got the crowds and, you know, you got the relevance and, you know, everything's going to be a success? How hard is that decision making?
I think this is my third time playing Australia. It's pretty easy. You just have to endure a 16-hour Qantas flight and get like the right type of sleep aid. I mean, because of Netflix, you know, I'm open. I get to play audiences I never thought I would. Like, I just came back from Iceland. I've played, you know, places everywhere from Malaysia to Tokyo to Hungary to Portugal. And so Australia, to me, it's not like it's coming home, but like I have established a nice fan base there. I've got friends there. And so I think Australians have an excellent sense of humor. And I think when you come out to see a show, you're coming to see a Netflix comedian, you're coming to see that comedian, you're coming to see that American take, and Australians get it. I mean, they have wicked sense of humor. Some of my favorite comedy acts are from Australia. And so it's kind of like, especially in Sydney, it's kind of like playing LA, but perhaps just like a little nicer.
Well, but the weather's pretty good here at the moment. This year, 2023, we had a big lineup of lots of people coming to Australia, like Jocko Willink, a whole lot of people coming here. Like, and then all of a sudden we started to get a lot of cancellations.
I mean, it depends on the reason you're canceling. I mean, people cancel for all types of reasons. Obviously, COVID was a huge reason. I actually was in Australia like the week before COVID hit.
Wow.
Sometimes this is like, no one's gonna like I'm saying this, but like if your tickets don't sell, you're like, oh, sorry, it was a scheduling issue, and the issue is not enough of you scheduled to come see me because it has to fiscally make sense. But I try to be as upfront and honest with my fans if I do have to move something, and I always give refunds. But I can tell you that for Australia, I mean, this has been something, a visit I've been looking forward to for quite some time because I haven't been there since pre-pandemic. So we're very due for a visit.
How good has Netflix been for comedians?
It's great. I think Netflix has been the best thing to happen to your touring business if you are benefiting from it ever. I mean, it completely changed the game. You know, you don't need to be on the Tonight Show. You don't need to have had a special on Comedy Central. Like Netflix came in, they were like, this is the home for comedy. And they have the biggest audience. You know, there's so many great places to do comedy, but there's no denying the reach of Netflix. And, you know, the weirdest moment in it's all weird, but was going to Malaysia and you're just sitting in front of a group of people who look nothing like you and they all knew my dog's name. They were all excited. Like they know you. And I think it's stand-up already brings people together in such a cool way, but just to have this global reach to find people who think like you across the world is an incredible feeling.
I mean, for me, looking at comedy, I've learned a lot more about comedians, particularly international comedians like yourself, during the COVID period because of something like Netflix than I would have ever learned before. And I also now learned there's a different style of comedy. Well, it looks like to me there's a different style of comedy out there to what I was used to seeing. And I mean, I used to see Australian comedians mostly, and they'd be at functions and stuff like that. Has comedy changed over as a result of COVID? I mean, is there a result of political correctness and all those other things that have evolved out of during that same period?
Comedy always has changed, always will change, is ever changing. And I think because of the ubiquity of the internet, because of social media, because your audience is not relegated to a dark room in a club. Now it's online, it's in a comment section. The people watching aren't necessarily your fans. So it used to be to go to see a comic, you had to make a great effort to do that. And now it's just whatever wafts into your algorithm. So it's changed in terms of accessibility. There's certainly a lot more people doing it. And the public outrage, people always got offended, but now it's amplified. But I do think after the masses settle and put down their pitchforks, and I think after the pendulum swings sort of back to the middle, the cream always rises to the top. You'll always have comics who are saying horrible things to get a laugh. And the truth is, at the end of the day, there are things that are funny and there are things that aren't. And it's subjective. But if enough people find it funny, you're going to sell tickets. And I have my preference about what I think is funny or what's not funny. But because it's art, we have to allow for it.
Yeah, because comedians seem to me to be able to talk about things that no one else could talk about. If we talk about, we get so-called cancelled. I mean, how edgy do you like to take it? What's off limits? You might not be able to tell me specifically what's off limits, but how do you determine those sorts of things? Do you have a team or is it just you?
No, it's just me. Nobody tells me what I can or can't say. I mean, if you hire me for a corporate gig and you ask me, and it's for Coca-Cola, and you ask me not to say I love Pepsi, I still might say I love Pepsi. It's like catnip to a comic. But, for me, I always look at intention, and I always look at, is this really in my heart? It's okay if you want a cheap laugh. Some people make a good living off of that. I tend to say things that I would wholeheartedly argue, that I feel in my heart, that I don't get anxious about posting, like, oh, I hope this isn't controversial. So I say things that come from a good place. And what we have to allow for in our society is, and by the way, like, you could say awful things, and if you mean them, okay, at least you're going to stand by them. But we have to allow for people to have made a mistake, to make a mistake, and to be like, oh, I said that and I didn't mean it. Like, I had a joke about like killing polar bears forever ago. I really want polar bears to live. This was more commentary on the type of commercial that the polar bear was in. But I'm sure people would take umbrage with that today. So people don't understand context and they don't understand time. And so they'll take your clip from 20 years ago when something was not as frowned upon. And they'll say, how could you do that? Forgetting that people have changed, time has changed.
Yeah, it's hard to judge. It's impossible to judge by today's standards what was someone else's standard 20 years ago or 15 years ago. Do you think comedians, and particularly yourself, are you really making comedy out of topics that should be discussed and perhaps debated?
I think I'd be an asshole if I was just like, I am your educator. But I think the thing is, you go for it. You make the art you want to make. You say the things that you feel are important, that keep you up at night, that you find fascinating. And a good comic will say thought-provoking things in an intelligent way that's funny, that makes you think, that questions things. You can turn it on its ear. I mean, George Carlin called stand-up comics like modern-day philosophers. Comedy at its best is that. Comedy at its best can also be a dick joke and a pratfall. It really just depends. But I think a really good comic is able to question things, question status quo, and include without making people feel attacked. Because I think the second your audience feels it's okay to say something about someone in the crowd, and then they're like, "Ooh, that's me," but then maybe you make fun of yourself and you level the playing field. Nobody pays to feel like a piece of shit. Well, maybe some guys do because like that's their kink, but like nobody pays to go to a comedy show and be shit on. That's not fun, especially if the comic isn't shitting on themselves or everyone else. So it's a fine line.
Yeah, like sitting in the front row and someone says, "Is that your partner?" Like, I mean, I've seen this happen in some of the comedy shows, and I'd be shitting myself. I mean, I'd be terrified if I wouldn't want to sit in the front row because in case someone's going to start picking on me or pulling me out of the crowd. How do
well,
you?
Then you shouldn't sit in the front row.
I won't be. Fuck that. No way.
Okay.
No way. No way.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, I've always been intrigued how a comedian actually writes material or builds material or builds your content up. I mean, what do you sit down on a piece of paper and jot down some ideas, or do you take out what worked in the past, or do you use some data? Do you look at data points and say, well, this worked, this didn't work? How do you actually build your show? And particularly for, say, coming here to Australia?
Well, every comic does it differently. I don't write like physically. I don't sit there and like keep a Word doc. I have like a list of keywords, kind of like a court reporter. And I get up every night and I do 15-minute sets here, 20-minute set there. And I just sort of talk it out. And then you begin to sort of mold it, craft it into the scaffolding that becomes your act. And so what you'll be getting, you know, my 6th Netflix special, Hot Forever, came out in October. And so it hasn't been that long since then. So if you watch the special and you see me live, you're going to get 2 different shows. There might be some overlap, but you'll be seeing some of the jokes I've been working on since. We always have a couple of local references, but you don't want to treat your audience, A, like they're stupid, or B, especially in Australia's case, like you're not that foreign. Like we're all speaking English. We all kind of watch a lot of the same shows. Like, you know what's up, especially coming from America. Like our number one export is entertainment. So, and we also, like, I know if I say feet, not meters, the audience isn't going to be like, huh? Doesn't go the other way. If you came here and you were like 3 meters, we'd be like, what? So there is this, you're allowed a little bit more in America to like rep for your pop culture, and people are on board because we all kind of share American pop culture. So I'm there to do my act, bring up things, say the thing that you didn't know you felt or hadn't been questioning, and just really give you like a hard-hitting hour of nonstop stand-up.
And you look like you're a young woman. You know, you're a young
Thank
woman.
you. Finally, someone admitted it.
When did you? My producer's laughing head off at me at the moment. But how did you know you're going to be a comedian? I don't know. Like, you were always a funny kid, or there was someone you looked up to?
Yeah. Yeah, I think when it was clear I wasn't going to be a professional athlete, they were like, I just, you know, I get that question a lot, and it's kind of like everybody's got that thing that they're good at. That, you know, whether it's you're really good looking or you're really good at sports, you're good at math or a musician. And I was just always funny. And I just always, that was my currency. I always made people laugh. And that's how I attracted friends and the guys that knew what was good for them. And I just knew I was going to be funny for a living without really knowing anything about stand-up. So the stand-up career that I've crafted has been largely out of my own imagination, less from mentorship or like watching stand-ups. I kind of just did it.
So can we talk about your book, All Things Aside?
Sure. Do you really
What
want
inspired
to?
you? Yeah, I do.
It was my second book. My first book was called Girl Logic, and that came out, I think, 2018. And that was sort of thesis-based, and I was trying to explain with humor why women do the things we do, because we're always called crazy. But there's a way that we think that does drive us nuts, but it's actually an adaptive like way of surviving in this world. And then I didn't want to keep writing about that. I didn't want to keep explaining girls, but I didn't want to write an autobiography. So I just decided, like a lot of funny people, sorry, it's my alarm. I hope you don't hear that. Will you go to that alarm and just hit a button on it? I don't know how that works. Sorry, the alarms in my house are broken and I really don't want to fix them. I'll let my husband do it.
Hopefully it's not someone breaking in.
No. I mean, honestly, like come and take like my socks and my like protein shaker of water. I wanted to write a book of personal essays. I wanted to tackle things that you can have a little bit more grace with. In stand-up, you know, you need punchlines per minute. You got to go. And in writing, which I do enjoy doing, you could be a little more elegant. You can be serious. You can be heartfelt. And you can really just delve into some things. I delved in. You can dive into some more emotional, more serious things. You can be a little bit more artistic, I think, without worrying about getting laughs from an audience.
What was the response to your book, David? So in other words, have you learned something from that response?
I think it's a beach read. I don't think this is, a serious, it's not, a story about, it's not like Mein Kampf or anything. And so I think the response I get to that is just sort of reinforcing a response that I get a lot in my stand-up, which is, oh my God, I had that experience. I feel that. I completely agree with this, but the response is less important, I think, in an artistic process. What's important is that I got it out. And I think that's for stand-up, for anything that you create. What's important for the artist is to get it out, to put pen to paper, to say it, to speak it, to sing it. And then how the audience interprets it, weirdly, isn't my business. Like when you have a song that you love so much and you're like, oh my gosh, these lyrics meant everything to me. I tattooed them on my throat. And then you find out that guy like wrote it drunk about a pet. And you're like, oh no, it doesn't take away from the fact that it meant something to you, but how I intend it and how you receive it are two totally separate things.
As growing up as a kid, who was your favorite comedian and why?
It's not even so much someone as like, I loved sketch and I grew up in like the 90s. So the women of SNL at that time, Chris Farley, Adam Sandler, I loved, even though it's a bit anachronistic, but I loved like Monty Python. I loved Absolutely Fabulous. The Kids in the Hall, The State. So it was funny characters and people, because when you grow up without like an older brother and I had a single mom, you don't really have someone curating your comedic itinerary. You're just sort of whatever's on ABC at 10 at night. It's Martin or Living Color on Comedy Central. So I would just watch whatever I could. And then that's what forms it.
What does your mum think of you being a comedian and the type of comedian you are? But did she ever say, Liza, I can't believe you said that? Or do you ever sort of get a clip from your mum? Because I still get it from, my mum only passed away a couple of years ago. She used to clip me for things I said in the media. And my dad still does. In fact, my dad hates the fact that I don't shave. This is a new thing. It's a COVID thing. But I just carry through COVID. I don't shave. And my dad clips me every time I see him. He said, when are you going to shave the stupid beard off?
My mom says the same thing to me.
You got a beard?
No, I mean, I'm 40. So I think like, it's like, this is the act. This is what we're doing. I think they're very proud of it. I think when you are the parent of an artist, I think because I've been successful at it, it's kind of like, all right, like we have to like let her have her process. But I actually don't mind the check-in, sometimes I'll do something or I'll say something and my mom will be like, that wasn't you. That wasn't nice. And I'll be like, you know what? You're right. But in terms of the wording, I also think generationally, it's just, we're kind of not on the same page, not in a bad way, just the things that my generation gets upset about or PC stuff that I so wholly understand because I'm in the thick of it. Sometimes I have to have a conversation with my mom about it, but my parents have always been super open and very proud. I think they think it's very cool.
Well, I actually think in some respects, your generation, it's tougher. I think your generation is more judgmental than, say, your mum or I might even be further than your mum's generation. No, I'd be your mum's generation. So, yeah, I mean, I think we have a broader spectrum of what's okay, because I think in your generation and below you, very judgmental. Like everybody's this whole culture, cancel culture, and what's politically correct. We didn't really give a shit about that. Like no one ever thought about that, particularly here in Australia. Anyway, me growing up and me as an adult.
Definitely not Australia. I love Australia. You guys are 10 years behind feminism, and a very funny story to illustrate that is, and the women are strong and everybody's great. One of our best friends is Australian, and my husband went to Australia. He was doing some work there, and he gets there, and the woman coming to pick him up, our friend's like, oh, when she picks you up, her name's Sweet Tits. And you can just tip her, she'll take you anywhere you want to go. He's like, oh, I'm not going to call her Sweet Tits. That's not really. And the woman picks him up. She goes, how you going? I'm Sweet Tits. Where you want to go? So I mean, I will push back on that. I don't disagree. I do think I'm not Gen Z, but Gen Z is very sensitive. I think millennials are very sensitive. However, if you are the one who has been marginalized, if you are anything other than like straight and white, you have fully felt how shitty it feels to be cast out. And so I think for people to finally have the chance and the platform to say like, hey, we don't love being called that, or hey, that's actually really hurtful. I think it's not a bad thing for people to hear that. I think that movement and all of its intention is great. And then we get to a place where people are overly sensitive, and that's where you get the pushback. But like I said at the beginning, I think the overcorrect is always necessary in order to come back to your middle. You know, there's no version where I think all men are pigs. I think that making statements like that is damaging and ignorant. But I do think there are enough men out there who do take advantage of women in a workplace or not listening, that if you can drain that swamp and get it back to a place where now at least women can say something without being burned at the stake, I think that's a good thing. But none of it has any place in stand-up as long as you're making people laugh. And if you don't like it, you could just not buy a ticket.
Yeah, well, I was watching a whole heap of different stand-up comedians. It was some aggregation platform. They had a whole lot of different excerpts of various comedians talking. And one of the things I noticed was, and I used to always think it's a bit weird, a lot of comedians bag their partner, husband, wife, or they talk about their kids, or their mother. They sort of put shit on their parents, whatever.
I have a 1-year-old daughter. I do not share pictures of her face. I don't have her in my act. I believe you teach people how to treat you, and you give people permission to comment on your life when you share certain things. And I think it's, it's the oldest punchline in stand-up in comedy, take my wife, please. So it was always de rigueur to make fun of your wife, right? You were the poor put upon husband, your wife's a nag. And then for women, it was like, my husband's such an idiot. That is the honeymooners sitcom model, right? I really respect my husband, and that's not in my heart. I don't think he's an idiot or an oaf or anything. So it's just not organic to who I am. And I don't really talk about my family. It just happens to not be my point of view. You might grow up with a big Greek family, so you're making fun of your family, and that's so personal and so right for you. I just don't, because I also don't want someone to ever come up to me and say something shitty about my husband, and it's okay because I said that. Same thing with my daughter, so you have to be careful when you are a public figure sharing stuff. Just remember, not everybody deserves to be totally let in. You have to keep some things for yourself, or at least I choose to.
What you're sort of saying to me is that a comedian who does whatever you talk about, you're effectively giving your audience and all those people watch it permission to say something back to you or think something about you. And it's about where you give permission and or where you take permission away.
Yeah. And I think when you're a woman, we are a little bit more delicate. It doesn't mean you can't be bawdy and brash and bold and all the other words that journalists love to use to describe women in comedy. But you have to be careful because, again, when you put something out there, like I was saying before, you cannot control the way people receive it or how they interpret it. And so you might say your husband's an idiot and you're saying it from love and he's just a big teddy bear. But then somebody will write to you online, or they'll be like, yeah, and her big Iliza Shlesinger and her big dumb husband will be at this event. And then you're like, oh, how can you say that? And you're like, oh no, I only talk about him being dumb. Of course they're going to think that. If you call your wife an idiot all the time, people are going to think it's okay. And I think that goes down to the way you speak about your group, whatever you are. You're Black, you're Jewish, you're Mexican, you're whatever. If you make jokes about your people, you have to be careful the type of joke you're making, because then other people will think it's okay, So it's just, these are things when you are crafting jokes to think about. How am I coming across? What is the actual message? What is it that I want to say? Because don't ever think that the audience is just like you, and has the same experiences as you.
It's funny because we have a comedian here in Australia, a number of comedians here in Australia who have a crack at the Greek community. And the Greek community, my community, we all love these guys and girls, and but they're always they're basically having a crack at It's a bit like that My Big Fat Greek Wedding style.
Yeah.
For some reason or other, the Greeks are fascinated by it as a community in Australia. We're fascinated. We love it. We actually love people putting shit on our community about how silly we are, and I don't know, we just love it. And those particular comedians do very, very well in Australia because we have the biggest Greek population outside of Athens in the world.
Do.
And but I often wonder. I like it too. I think it's really funny. And but I don't know why I think it's funny. I mean, I just don't know why. Why I like laughing at myself.
I mean, that's the oldest question. Like, why is something funny? And I think we talk about intention. Like, is that person Greek? And if they're not, when they make fun, are they also making fun of some other groups? Are these surface observations that don't point to something else? Like, it's one thing to be like, yeah, and you guys just break plates like you own stock in Pottery Barn. Or are they like saying like, you break plates because you're so stupid, you can't hold on to them? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know what the joke is. And I think it's always about intention and what you're really saying and what's your greater point. And so, I mean, these are just the mechanics that go into it, and it can be the reason a joke flops or doesn't flop. And it's all about who's your audience, knowing your audience, how far can you push it?
There was a movie released recently on, I think it was Paramount Plus or Netflix, one of those, doesn't really matter. Anyway, the guy, his name's Nick Giannopoulos, and he's an Australian comedian, and it's called Wog Boys Forever or something like that. And it's Wog Boys Forever. And it's a part of a series of movies he's put out over the last 20 years. And Nick came on the show, and Nick told me he's a very serious dude. He's not even funny in real life, like you and I. You're naturally sort of funny to me. He's not like that. He's really serious. And his whole thing is about a social comment on how Greeks, Italians, lots of other people would call wogs in Australia, and how, we cop the rough end of the stick, so to speak, in his mind. And I thought, wow, that's pretty heavy. Like, I didn't realize you were so serious about this sort of stuff. So social comment from a comedian, is that a big part of what you think about? Social comment, things that have affected your life badly?
Things that have not so much, there are things that affect my life, but then there are things that I can speak to because I can represent them. Like, I may not have a boss who says pejorative things to me because I'm self-employed, but that doesn't mean I can't stand up and say something funny about that situation for a woman. Like, there are things that you feel in your bones as a woman that you can speak to. I can't get up there. I can say, like, I can be very pro LGBTQ community. I can't stand there as a gay person, because I'm not, and speak to that specific thing. So when you are a comic, there are things you can stand up for, and there are jokes that you'll never quite be able to tell because they're just not your perspective, and you just don't have it in you. I always say, like, the good thing about trauma is that it's yours to draw on. Like, you have cancer, somebody was racist to you. Like, the good news is you can make fun of that forever in a way that someone hasn't gone through it can't. And every country handles these things differently. And I bet for your Greek thing, I wonder if it would bother you a little bit more if, like, your skin wasn't so light and if your life had been just like a little bit different. I'm not here to, like, be a pillar of all things anti-racist, but I do think it's easy when you are like a white person to be like, this is okay, it doesn't hurt, because at the end of the day, you just look like a white person. And I'm super mindful of these things the longer I go in this career and where my perspective comes from, not vilifying one gender or color over the other, but just always trying to look at things intelligently and make jokes that are always true to me.
Do you look for authority, though, from your audiences? And I know when I say your audience, not just the people in the room on the night that you're doing a live show, for example, but your audience is generally stuff off Instagram, off various social mediums. Do you look for where they're going to give you authority to make a joke about?
I don't seek the validation, because if I'm saying something, look, you're going to make mistakes, but we're talking now the last several years, these last few specials especially. If I'm saying something, I believe it, and it doesn't matter if you disagree, because I said what I said. And, that's part of being an artist, is being okay and being proud of what you created. Whatever the joke is, a dick joke, a fat joke, a feminism joke, commentary, a joke about your mom, and putting it out there and having the balls to stand by it. you can always walk something back and be like, hey, at the time I thought this was okay. It's not, and that should be allowed. But people will seek to tear you down just because you make a joke about pumpkins, you know? And so that feedback is constant. So you have to just decide, like, look, this is not a two-way street. I have put something out there. It is felt in my heart. It's funny. I've tested this. It's out there. And I'm not interested in your feedback. I want you to laugh, but like, if you want to send me a comment, you want to send me a DM about how this offended you, that's not how this goes. This is not a call and response. This is, I say something and you pay for the ticket and you laugh, you know? At its core, that's what art is. It's not a back and forth.
So you're not looking for authority or consent. But when they do come at you, like let's say there's 100 comments about something you might have said, and let's say it's DMs or whatever it is, however they come to you, do you sit back and say, maybe I'm going to have to take that out next time? Or do you say, fuck it, I think that's cool and I did it respectfully and blah, 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 and I believe in it. I'm going to keep it in my content.
I mean, I'll just get really specific about it. Like, there is no next time, because if you're seeing it on Netflix, I'm not repeating the joke again. Like, it's never going to be in another special. You get your feedback in real time from the audience, you know? So like, let's say I make a joke about Greek people and all of my audiences laugh at it over the course of like 4 years. Okay. It's road tested. 100% of people liked it. The Greek people liked it. And then 10 years later, new people are like, hey, that Greek joke isn't funny. You might revisit it with fresh eyes and be like, yeah, now that I know a little bit more, like I see. But people forget that that joke was upheld. It was not created in a vacuum. It was endorsed by thousands and thousands of people. And so that just kind of goes back to context and letting things, if somebody said something and it bothered you, coming back all these years later to be like, look at that, as if that person like went back in time and made the joke knowing what they know now. It's just silly.
You said earlier on you don't work for someone, so you're not in a sort of an office environment or a retail shop or whatever it is, but you work for yourself. But you're in the business of what?
I'm so sorry. Will you grab her? My dog. My dog saw something outside and now the world has to end. What I get from stand-up, and I think I don't know what I was looking to do when I started, and the way your act is received and the things that you write over time, it changes the objective. I think all comics want is to feel seen and to feel heard and to fill in the gaps in an understanding, and to poke holes in arguments and to say the other side of stuff and subvert expectations. I like making points that make women feel not so alone. And I like when men see my act because I never shit on men. I like it when men see it and they're like, hey, that's something I didn't know. And you didn't make me feel bad about it. I like this inclusive, hard-hitting, fun education that's great for both. I really like being like a broad comic that at the end of the day, it's just a really good time. I'm not there to give like a political speech.
And you said you had a 1-year-old baby, 1-year-old child.
I do.
A daughter or a son?
I still do.
Yeah, yeah. Thank God. A daughter or a son?
Yeah. She's okay. Yeah. A little girl.
A little girl. Does she travel with you when you travel?
She doesn't. I think at this age, your schedule, her like little schedule is important. And so she goes to bed at 6:30. So if she traveled with me, it's not like she or I would be getting a lot out of that exchange when I'm working. So she has come to 1 or 2 things when I've been somewhere for a while, but Australia would be very difficult on her little body. When she's older, she can come.
Because I'm trying to work out how tough it is for a mum, a new mum.
Yeah.
Not only being away from her husband or partner, but also being away from a young child. I mean, how tough is that?
It's hard to be away from my husband and my partner because I have sex with both of them. No,
because
I just have
one and the same.
No, it's different. 2 dudes. No. It is. I'm finding out how difficult it is. We just took a vacation to Iceland, and I am going to be honest. I did a show at the end of it, but I did not. It was beautiful. The country was awesome. It was really hard to enjoy myself because I chemically, like, you just miss my child so much. And it will be difficult, and it is difficult. I think it's easier. I'm going to announce my fall tour coming up, and you could do like 3 days out, come home. But it is hard when you get into like a week, 2 weeks. It is I I'm starting to fully understand how women quit their jobs or why women have to give up dreams, because apart from childcare, like emotionally, it is so difficult. And it's so funny because moms get so tired, and I do have full-time help and I have a husband, and it's still tiring. Women don't want to break from their children when they're away from them. I want to break from her while I'm holding her. Like if someone could just take my daughter every 15 minutes and hold her, that would be great. But it's hard when you're away from them. It's like your heart's missing.
We're lucky you're going to come to Australia. You're going to be in Sydney, Melbourne, then you're going off to Auckland.
Yeah.
And we're talking about it at the beginning of February, and it's a great way to start 2023 from my point of view. That's going to see something that's really, really funny. So Iliza Shlesinger, got that out. See, by the way, when I say your surname, I'm reminded that I've got to go back to see my neurosurgeon who's looking at my neurosurgeon.
You're like, I've got to go see someone else Jewish in my life to do something medical. That's what you think.
Spend some money. But Iliza, thanks very much. I really appreciate your time. And I can't wait to see you in February. Thank you.
Mark, I will see you and your muscles, not in my front row, but in my audience.
I won't be in the front row. Don't worry about that.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. Bye. Thank you so much. You guys have a great day.